Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have a great guest on. And if you're looking at any aspect of business, any aspect of what's going on in the world, one of the very big topics that comes up is energy. And what I wanted to do is bring on a guest that's working and doing great work in the energy sector as far as the things that they're coming up with. They have some patent pending technology that I think is great, but it's also good to hear their story about how they went from, caring about the subject matter to actually doing something in the industry. So, Zora Chung, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Terrell. Good to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, before we jump into talking the details about the business ReJoule, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what kind of led up to the launch of this business?
Yeah, definitely. So my background is actually in corporate finance. So I've previously worked at Clorox and Walmart, managed their budgets and various business units. And at Walmart, I even onboarded a few of our acquisition targets, which were all small startups. And I grew really, really interested in working with those teams because, unlike Walmart, which, is a very well-run company, is still going to be bureaucratic at the end of the day. And then when we worked with these small startups, we're trying to merge those two types of cultures together. And I just found it just very refreshing, just the speed at which people were moving, and also the breadth of the work, because you're not just wearing one hat, you're wearing like 20,000 in some cases. And also, Walmart was doing a lot of great work in sustainability, which I was really proud of. My co-founder, he's the one who actually came up with the idea for ReJoule, came to me for some business advice in terms of how to think about it. So I basically helped him part-time. We did some interviews with potential customers and people in the industry to really understand, is he tackling a problem that we have? And boy, was he right. Like, there's just a huge problem that we see coming with battery waste in our future if it's not handled correctly, and if we don't develop technologies to kind of streamline the battery's life cycle. And since then, I basically just decided to leave Walmart full time and pursue this 100% of the time.
Awesome. And that's a great point that you brought up, because I remember when working in General Electric, and there were some, target companies that were acquired, or some target operations that were acquired. And it was always very interesting to see how those who were, I guess I could say, born and raised in General Electric and the General Electric way of doing things, how they had these somewhat challenges of, okay, how do we now bring this smaller startup type organization into the fold, to where there was
Yeah.
always like this constant rub, and this, like, you know what, there is a completely different mentality for running a small business versus a huge established business.
Yeah, definitely. And there's no right or wrong. And seeing a little bit of that friction is actually very interesting, because it's not bad or good. It's just, it's going to happen, and you just have to learn how to work with it.
Mhm. Gotcha, gotcha. Now, also the other thing I think, when you have so many people focus on sustainability, how did you guys get comfortable of, say, with the decision that, hey, you know what, we're taking the right angle? Because, that's something with a lot of business owners when they're kind of looking at their, their business model or their idea, like, hey, the idea is great, they're passionate about it, but how did you guys start to get comfortable with, hey, you know what, this idea has enough, there's enough foundation here for us to really pursue it?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and one that's so important for, I think, each new entrepreneur to really understand. The way we approached it is, as I mentioned before, is we just went out and started talking to people in the industry. My background at Clorox and Walmart is not in batteries. My co-founder's background, he did study batteries, and he previously had worked in the defense industry, but it's a little bit different when you're just talking about defense versus like automotive and energy, for instance. So we went and talked to a lot of people. I think as of now, we've talked to over 200 different industry stakeholders, and we have gone through a few different pivots. So I would say we narrowed down to really understand the problem. There's a lot of them. So of the problems, which ones can we address based on our skill sets and our resources? So we at first thought of helping to repurpose batteries. So actually taking in used battery inventory and then putting it in a new application. Since then, we've narrowed our focus to diagnostics, which is more specialized and something that we are better positioned to do with the skill sets that we have. And we work with people that are doing repurposing who are much better at logistics and have big warehouses and also have some relationships with automakers to source these batteries as well.
And I think that's a very interesting thing. I mean, like I said, of being able to know your own, I guess you say, taking an inventory of your own skill sets. Now, I guess during that process, I guess was there I guess you say a little bit of an emotional pull of like, hey, we want to like tackle the big problem, but it's like we need to be realistic on, hey, what should our niche be? So, kind of, how'd you guys navigate that piece of it?
Yeah, definitely after talking to the various customers and then, trying to understand the whole industry landscape, then we think, okay, if we were to approach it this way, what are some of the costs that we have to keep in mind? And of course, my finance background was very helpful here. So we walked through step by step, what are the things that we need to do? And then what are the costs associated with it? And also what specialties do we have? And at that time, there was just two of us. So obviously that's very limited. And so then you look at it from a staging standpoint. So at this point, given our resources and what we know, what can we do? And can we eventually build towards that eventual goal? And that's a maybe. And so you just keep working at it. And then we started recruiting new team members, and that always helps us know what our focus should be as well. So I would say that it's an ongoing process because as you have new resources and as the world around us changes, then you might actually find a pocket of opportunity that didn't exist before. So I think just keeping a pulse on the market, continuing to talk to industry stakeholders is really important. And that's how we continue to refine, our approach and where we want to focus.
And I'm glad you mentioned about, like I said, your finance background, because I mean, that being my background as well, I know we talked about that before, and it's just like, it's one of those things that's always good for, the audience and entrepreneurs and business owners to hear. It's just like, at some point you do have to step out of how you feel about the idea and look at, hey, what do the numbers really tell you? And then kind of navigate forward. So I think that's amazing. And thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, welcome.
Now, when you guys think about, as you've navigated through, like I said, the customer discovery, the ongoing kind of networking and really hearing and narrowing down your niche, what role has kind of, that network in, I guess you say, that the connections that you've made, the over 200 connections, like what role has that played, now that you guys have figured out your niche and as you're trying to grow the business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that some of our biggest pivots have come from feedback from potential customers and industry stakeholders. And sometimes it's things that we never would have even thought of. So I'll give you just a quick example of some of the products that we're looking to launch. The first one is based on, where we are today and what the technology can already do. And so if you already have used batteries that are removed from a vehicle, we can help test and grade those. That's where the technology is ready now. So if you're looking to repurpose, we can help you improve your sustainability. The next phase that we originally had planned was basically to shrink down the technology and be able to embed it into an electric vehicle. And this would remove the need to have an independent tool later on because you would have ongoing monitoring and optimization. What we didn't plan for and what came about through various customer discovery interviews is there was also a need to assess the battery's health while it was still inside the car. We got this from a huge auction company for used vehicles, insurance companies, and even automakers. Because right now you hear about them saying, there's lower maintenance on EVs, and that's because they ignore the huge battery that's actually powering the vehicle. So how do you understand the health of the battery when, your cell phone you might use for 2 to 3 years, and those batteries are easy to recycle. But for an electric vehicle, we're talking about 500 to 1,000 pounds. It's not easy to recycle. And right now, 97% of mechanics are not trained to handle an electric vehicle. That's going to be a huge problem when these become at scale. So that's when we had actually inserted a product in our roadmap in between the early grading tool to the embedded tool, so that we can help diagnose batteries while they're on the road today.
Mhm. I mean, that's an amazing point because when you think about, mechanics, and they are deeply trained in the automotive and literally the mechanics of how a vehicle works, but not so much the battery and the electric side. So, I mean, that's a very great point. I mean, that will be a challenge as so I guess when people are driving electric vehicles, I mean, do they just have to go back to the manufacturer to get them repaired? Or have you guys seen other mechanics being able to develop the skill set to address that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of smaller shops that are coming about. There's not too many because most of the EVs right now are still under warranty. So if it's under warranty, you would definitely go back to the dealership. But there are some, early Nissan Leaf and even Teslas that are now out of warranty, and people are looking for places to service them because if you go back to the dealer, it's often incredibly expensive. So we've spoken with a few of them. I tried to understand what are some of the tools, and sometimes it's really random things that could be issues. Like one that we've heard of a lot, which does not exist in a gasoline car, is the charging port. So if you're using the charging port almost maybe at least 2 to 3 times a week, if not every day, that can have different safety or malfunction issues that maybe a regular mechanic might not be able to address.
Mhm. Gotcha. No, that
Mhm.
makes perfect sense. So now, when you guys think about, where you've been with ReJoule and just kind of what's going on now, what are your thoughts on what does the future look like for ReJoule?
Yeah, we're very excited that we have a few big grants that are helping us do development and deployment. The biggest one is actually a $3 million grant from the California Energy Commission, where we will actually be utilizing our module grading tool to grade used batteries. So we actually have 30,000 pounds of used electric truck batteries in our warehouse right now that we're processing. And then in about a year or so, we will be deploying those batteries in a solar and storage application at 2 commercial buildings in Southern California. So this is definitely where the California state wants to go with renewable energy, and storage will be a huge component of it. And if we can actually fulfill that storage requirement with used batteries, then we actually improve like the circular economy and make electric vehicles even more sustainable. So we're at the point now too, also where we want to take the technology from the lab into the field. So we're actively seeking partners to do proof of concepts. And, we have some big announcements that will be coming up in the coming weeks, but unfortunately, I can't say anything about that right now.
Absolutely, that is
Yeah.
perfect. So where can people find you guys online or on social media to keep an eye on, the upcoming announcements and what's going on with ReJoule?
Yeah. So our website, which is rejouleenergy.com, you can also sign up for a newsletter that is sent quarterly. And of course, we're definitely active on social media. We have a LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram account. So definitely welcome people to follow. And, I'd be happy to talk to people more as well. You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Just look for Zora Chung. I don't think there's that many of these names, so maybe easier to find me.
Awesome. Well, before we
Yeah.
wrap up the interview, one question I like to ask every guest that comes on me, when you think about, the journey that you've been on, from your corporate career to ReJoule, what's 2 lessons that you've learned that you would share with other business owners?
Yeah, I think the first one, which was a challenge for me personally, was to actually talk about the business a lot. And this includes friends, because when I worked at Walmart, like people kind of had an idea what your company was. So more specific on the role, like it was very easy. But to talk about the company where it's, almost like your baby, like you're always afraid that you might say something wrong and people might reject you. But really, I had to fight that because one, I had to get better at talking about the company. We're a deeply technical product. So I had to find a way to talk about that with a more general audience. And two, you also never know who that person may be or who that person may know. that could actually help you in your journey. And we've actually gotten a lot of customer discovery through just a random conversation with someone about what we do. One of our advisors came across because one of my coworkers at Walmart said, oh, I have a friend that had worked in the automotive industry for 10 years. He sold his company to an automotive supplier. Would you like to talk to him? I'm like, yes, of course. And he actually is now one of our advisors. The other piece of advice, and Sorrel, I think this might speak to you, is to make sure you make time for yourself. I think especially when it's your own company, you manage your time, but what you tend to do is keep thinking about, what you need to do next to keep things moving forward. And if you burn yourself out, like you're not doing yourself or your company any favors. So for me personally, I found that no matter how busy or stressed I am, I make time to work out, and I have to do yoga at least once a week just to put my mind into a different place where I can calm myself down, and I find that I can be more productive afterwards.
Awesome. And thank you so much for that, because as everyone that watches and listens to the show knows that, that is one of those areas that I'm definitely, I always tell everyone, I'm a work in progress when it comes down to rest. I'm an A+ when it comes down to doing the work and getting things done. But when it comes down to rest, I'm probably like a C, maybe a C- at times.
Well, you're being honest with yourself, so that's the start.
Awesome. Well, Zora, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you, and I'll definitely, look forward to hear all the great things that are coming ahead for ReJoule. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.